All right, everybody, welcome back to Battleground Podcast. We are doing the second part of my interview with the great Rob Pinholt. Now, Rob was my radio telephone operator in Afghanistan. I voluntold him to do it. It's not something that he picked. And then now he got out of the military, and he's the CEO of Claymore Ops, which is a mentorship program for transitioning veterans. So served this country in uniform. He continues to serve those who serve us even now. He's a great, great American, and I'm psyched to have our second part of our conversation today. Rob, welcome back to the podcast, man. Thanks for giving me more of your time.
Man. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So we talked for about an hour the first episode, and I guess we were solving the problems of the world. I don't know. I really just want to just jump right into Afghanistan now. We had a rough deployment. Anybody who's watched this or knows about me or subscribed to this podcast, you probably have heard the story of Outlaw Platoon from me in a couple different ways. But the reason why I'm bringing my soldiers on is just because they give a completely different perspective on the fight there. And I want to do everything that I can to elevate their stories as well. And so Afghanistan was hell for me. I still think about it every day in some way. I mean, I'm not saying that it completely dominates my thoughts. But I mean, literally every day something will happen. I'll be like, oh man, that kind of reminds me of this, or, that time we were in Afghanistan smelled like this. You know what I mean, Rob?
Yeah.
So tell me about what were some of the seminal moments in Afghanistan for you?
Well, I think arriving there was a big deal. I mean, all we had, I think you were kind of in the same boat as I was, all we had to go off of in terms of what to expect was what the guys who had been there before had told us. We had several guys who had been, about 2 years prior, they had been to Afghanistan, and that was kind of all we had to go off of. But it's a very surreal experience to be there. You kind of know you're getting closer to the fight. It's like you read these stories about guys in World War I, and they could start to hear the guns off in the distance, and they know they're getting close to the front, and it kind of felt like that. Because for us, it was a plane. So you get on a plane in a familiar place, and you get off a plane, and you're surrounded by mountains and in a very unfamiliar place, and it's really a major shock to the system in a way. And so that was a big one, I would say.
Man,
do you remember that?
I do. Gosh, you're talking to me about it, and it's all flooding back to me now for the first time. You get off the bird there, and it's like you're just surrounded by mountaintops everywhere. And some of them some of them aren't huge, but the ones way off in the distance, like a Bagram, for example, is a good example of this. It's just towering mountains all the way around, 360 degrees. And never seen anything like that in my life. And it is incredibly surreal, especially the first time that you load live rounds in your magazines. There's this picture of me loading my magazines for the first time ever, and I look like a kid. I was a kid, but I was 23, looked scared shitless, completely out of my mind. And all you guys are sitting around me doing the same thing, in one of those shell buildings, the turtle shell buildings that they had there, and everybody had their gear hanging. It was like a shanty town, but
yeah.
I do remember that. It was crazy. And you get to the front where we were in Burmel on those outlying bases. I mean, at the time that was just where we were, but they legitimately were outlying forward operating bases. We lived, it seemed like, Rob, a completely different lifestyle than people who say deployed to Bagram, Salerno, or even our battalion headquarters at Organy, which was still all things considered, when compared to other bases, was still a fairly dangerous place in Organy, but Burmel was just so far out there. And we get to the base in Burmel, and it was just, again, hilltops everywhere. I mean, in another life, Afghanistan could be, a $1 billion plus industry for ski resorts and tourism and everything else if they can just get it together. But it is surreal, especially when what I thought of when somebody tries to kill you for the first time. That has stuck with me. And I think that moment for me has changed me in a lot of ways, where I remember thinking, well, you know, they shoot a rocket at us early on. Everyone was like, oh my God, we're getting our CIBs. It's going to be crazy, you know? But it was just thinking, like, there's somebody up in those hilltops that wants me dead and doesn't even know me. And I found that to be so bizarre.
Yeah. It kind of, you know, it to me, it brought me back to some of the things that I think the Army's pretty good at training soldiers for these kinds of situations, because, you know, I can remember going into basic training. We talked last time about putting on the uniform, but I also remember getting to the first rifle range, and I really hadn't done any shooting prior to that, maybe like Boy Scouts or something, to shoot a BB gun. It wasn't much, you know, and despite the fact that I'm from Texas. It struck me that we were not shooting at circular, like bullseye targets. We were shooting at human silhouettes, and just kind of creating that feeling of man versus man fighting. And of course, you know, then they call you body bag fillers and things like that. They you know, the drill sergeants will sing cadences with you about killing and being killed and all that kind of stuff, and they try to kind of condition you for it. And then when the time came when, like you said, we were being shot at, and I can remember at night looking off in the hills and seeing the lights of their campfires, you know, and maybe some of them were lumberjacks up there, but I suspect most of them were, you know, enemy reconnaissance patrols that were, you know, camped out for the night, keeping an eye on us. And you know, that is very surreal. It's very surreal to know that there's somebody who their whole mission is to snuff you out.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this in the last episode or talked about this with somebody recently, about how, you know, you hear like all these stories of these veterans are like, take it easy on us for 4th of July. Like, you know, I don't, it's 4th of July. Light off as many fireworks as you want. I can handle it. But I was sitting there listening to the fireworks, and they weren't freaking me out or anything, but it does bring me back to Afghanistan in the way that we would fall asleep. We would get used to just our 105s would fire all night. Like, we used to have what back then they were called OH&I fires, harassment and interdiction fires, which they don't do in Afghanistan anymore. And they didn't do, I mean, after we left, couldn't have been more than a couple years before they stopped that, you know, after the rules of engagement changes and everything else, you know. But just going to bed and getting used to those guns firing all night, and then you would hear the dull thuds out in the distance. It really is like watching a movie or something, falling asleep in the trenches and just hearing the machine guns, you know, over and over. I mean, it's so everything about it. Rob, I look back on my time
watching them fight each other. You remember them fighting each other? You'd see tracer rounds, and we knew we didn't have any American patrols over there, and it was one tribe fighting against another tribe that, you know, maybe they've been fighting for 1,000 years or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It is crazy. So I that was surreal for me, you know, and it's like you're falling asleep out there in the mountains. The enemy's all around us. You could either fall asleep in the truck, which is really uncomfortable, or stretch out and lay on the ground. But then you're worried about, this is going to sound crazy to people who are watching or listening, but you're worried about getting your throat cut in the middle of the night. And people, even when you had, like, we called them piss tubes, so forgive the, you know, the crude statement, but that's what we called them over there. Like these tubes that stick up, these PVC pipe tubes that stick up out of the ground that are buried. You know, the one end sticks up out of the ground. They've got this metal mesh netting like on the top, and they're buried 6 feet or something under the ground with crush and run gravel. And you go to the bathroom in them. We called them piss tubes. It's gross thinking back. But you'd have to wake up in the middle of the night and walk. For me, it was 100 yards or something, maybe less, maybe 50, 60 yards. It was still quite a distance in the middle of the night. And that's another thing that I'm thinking about now for the first time, how dark it was over there. And I mean, dark, when there's no ambient light, there's no cities, there's no towns, nobody has their front porch lights on, you know? and walking out. I mean, you can't see 6 inches in front of your face. It's pitch black, and you're worried. You've got Afghans, locals that we commissioned to work on our bases, and I'm like thinking, man, we're out here surviving in these direct fire engagements, and I'll be damned if I, get my throat cut going pee in a piss tube. That would be one hell of a way to go. But those are the things that you think about. Isn't that crazy? Is that crazy?
Oh, yeah, because when you got guys going at night, they're going to miss the tube sometimes and get it on the ground. So the ground is like saturated with like 100 men's urine, and the thought of it like a stray rocket coming in and hitting you, and you're there with your trousers down, laying in pee, slowly dying. There's something about that is somehow more mortifying than death itself. I don't know.
And this is why guys would pee in bottles. And you'd go into Greason's room, and I love Greason, and we lived right next to each other. Sergeant Greason was my platoon sergeant, and I think he would fully admit to this, because we all peed in bottles. Nobody wanted to use the piss tubes in the middle of the night.
I didn't do that.
And I go in there, and you go in there, and he'd be like watching the Outlaw Josie Wales or working on paperwork or something. And all along his walls, lined up on the little 2x4s that lined his walls, were like glistening bottles of urine. And we'd go to throw them out. We'd go to throw them out, and the Afghans would come and take the trash, and they'd pick it up, and it'd be like 9,000 pounds, because there's probably like 40 gallons of urine in there. It was just a great. Can you believe that we lived that life? Can you believe that? I can't believe that. But that was a grave fear of mine, and you described it perfectly. Nobody wants to get their throat cut and slowly bleed out in a puddle of 100 men's urine.
Well, I was a weirdo, and I never, I think twice did I go number 2 in the field at all for my entire time in the Army. I don't know how you pull that off, physiologically, but somehow that was the situation for me. And there was one night, and I don't know if you remember this, we were on a hill.
And you really had to go? You ran out there. I remember.
And there was a sniper. Do you remember that? There was some guy popping shots at us.
Yeah, I know.
And it was like they were inaccurate shots, so we kind of didn't worry about it. And it was getting dark. And then this thick fog fell. And this was the thickest fog I've ever experienced in my life, where you literally couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And I was like, I gotta go. So. And the way we had a linear cigar shaped patrol base going on instead of the more spread out one where we would have a slit trench, and so I had to just kind of meander down the hill away from the patrol to go find a rock, and I was just just any minute now some old boy with a knife is going to encounter me, and I'm going to mess in my pants. That's the weird things you think about in those situations.
Well, in what world? I mean, I remember hear the way that parents talk about their 20-somethings, and, I don't want my son. He's too young to drive across the country. And I'm like, Rob Pinholt was pooping in the middle of Afghanistan under sniper fire. It was younger than your son would be driving across the country. It's just... the whole thing is just so crazy, and those are the situations that I probably haven't talked about that in forever. But those are the things those are the situations that you find yourself in. That, man, if I go, nobody wants to go out like that, No.
Well, we were fortunate as far as moving around at night. We were fortunate to have those dogs. Remember the dogs we had on post there for a while.
Yes,
and I know we weren't really supposed to have them, but. They kept away all the riffraff, the bad dogs, let's say, the dogs didn't like us, and the rodents and things like that would get into our equipment. And
that was a stupid policy, by the way. And I get it. I do get it. You don't want a rabid dog coming down there biting a soldier, or I don't know.
But that's got to be the least of our worries, though. I mean, we're in combat. To have dogs is the trade off. You got to do a little bit of
They were just even mentally, Rob. They were our connection to back home. Dogs reminded, and what was crazy is that dogs hated the enemy. They knew it's almost like they knew who they were.
They did. They absolutely did.
And they could sense it, and they knew who was bad, even when we didn't. They could sense it, and that's so true, Rob. They would keep rodents away. They would actually guard us while we slept. And guys were locking and loading, going to the guard towers after they killed those dogs off because there were other dogs that were getting in that weren't our dogs, and they were mean. And we don't want to get bit by some dog on the way to a guard tower. And so to me, the trade off was. I just talked about this like with my wife, and she was like, remember when people were attacking you on the campaign trail, or the media was attacking you, saying like, I can't believe that in his book he refers to somebody as the male bitch. I'm like, well, first of all, I wasn't referring to her as that. It's just everybody was. And it was because we go out on patrol. She shows up at our base once every 6 months or something. Maybe even once in 16 months. I don't know. Shows up on our base, sees the dogs there, tells battalion or tells somebody, and they send somebody down to euthanize our dogs. Legitimately, they euthanized our dogs while we're out they waited for us to go out on patrol. They euthanized our dogs, and then they threw them on the burn pit, and Pantoja found the skulls on the burn pit. Like, can you imagine? I mean, I'm sorry, man. Like, that's just evil. And those dogs were, and the reason she did it, she did it because like all of this happened. She didn't do it, but she was just following orders, right? And it was in the defense of people who did this stuff. These were the rules. We're not supposed to have part of General Order Number 1 or some. I don't know. General Order Number 1 was like no drinking, sex, porn, stuff like that. But dogs were up there as well. You weren't allowed to have them. But we had vaccinated these dogs. They had all their vaccines and stuff. So. So she was just following orders, I guess, but still, that was a devastating moment for our guys.
It's overcautious. I mean, you talk about people not letting their kids drive across the country and whatnot. That this is excessive caution, and I think that kind of caution had far left us because we were under fire every day. And I think for the people who weren't under fire every day, caution was a little bit more. They were a little bit more comfortable with caution than they were with taking the chance to recognize that by leaving those dogs with us, they were countering, the negative effects of being in combat.
It's like going back to Bagram, and I had very few trips back to Bagram. Maybe more than most of the actual line troops in the platoon, but like would you get off the bird and people would be wearing road guard belts, like walking to the DFAC, and you're like, what? It was just a totally different world,
That's how somebody's incentive is to never make a mistake. And when your incentive is to never make a mistake, then you never do anything good. When your incentive is to find, fix, close with, and destroy the enemies of the United States of America in close combat through fire and maneuver, then that's where the American victory comes from. And the people who are making those road guard rules they're incentivized to not make mistakes.
That is interesting. You still remember the infantry mission? you just recited it like right out of the FM 7-8, the old field manual that they used to use. Yeah, that's really crazy. That's such a great point. And those people, obviously they lived in a different world. It was more. Bagram was safer than Atlanta. Remember we used to joke. I remember in the truck because you and I spent hours and hours just for people that are watching and listening. RTO went with me everywhere, and you weren't the RTO the whole time, but for the months that you were, we would just talk about everything. Remember we used to joke around like those guys up in Bagram should be paying the military to stay there. It's like a resort. They have these world-class gyms everywhere. They have iced coolers of bottled water on every corner.
Salsa night on Thursdays.
Salsa night. I think it was Wednesday, but I don't know. Maybe that was senior night. I don't know. Maybe that was senior night. I don't know.
I don't know. They had a different night. Yeah,
they did have salsa night. They did, and they were getting three hot meals a day. They were hot showers every day.
Plus, they had midnight chow.
They had midnight chow. God.
Yeah.
They had green bean coffee. They had Burger King. They had McDonald's. We were out there. We were humping 100 pounds up the Hindu Kush mountains at 15,000 feet. I think I was in the best shape of my life when I came back from Afghanistan. And then we go back to Bagram and be like, holy shit, some of these dudes gained weight. Like, it's like a perfect encapsulation of the difference between a frontline troop and somebody who's in the rear with the gear. And by the way, there's nothing. Everybody has a job. You know, when you join the military, the thing about the Army is that, and this is why I recommend young people, unless they want to do something highly specialized in the Navy, like be on a sub or, you know, captain of a nuclear aircraft carrier, or a fighter pilot or something. If you want to serve in the Army, and then the Army has everything. It's just like a reflection of the civilian world. You can be an accountant. You can be a nurse. You be in the quartermaster corps, do supply and logistics. You can be in the infantry like us and be on the front lines fighting. But you be a pharmacist, you can be a doctor, you can do anything in the Army. Engineer. They have everything. So if you wanted to serve your country, but maybe you didn't want to be a frontline troop, but you wanted the experience of service, 1,000,001 things you can do in the Army, you know? But, I mean, you don't have that same level of opportunity elsewhere. So my point is that everybody has a job. It's not a slight against those people. I will say that there was times when I was younger, in my 20s, where I didn't have the perspective that I have now. And I think, and the perspective that I have now is that if you volunteer to serve this country in a time of war, and you're going overseas, it doesn't matter if you're a Bagram or in Brumel, although one of those deployments from a combat standpoint is more difficult. You can get your ass shot off in Bagram as well. You're risking your life for the country, and that's all that matters to me. And I mean that. But I will say there were moments in my 20s as a platoon leader where you're getting shot at every damn day. And I'm like, how are these assholes getting paid the same combat pay as me? Do you ever wonder that? These guys are making the same amount of money as me.
Yeah.
So frustrating. So frustrating.
And it is such a different job. I mean, you know, when you think about the nature of the job, for what we did when we were in CONUS, which means back in the U.S. In garrison, we would train. That was our job. So we didn't have a job that we did on a day-to-day basis. We were preparing to do our job, which was combat. And the other guys, most of the other occupational specialties, they had a job to do at that moment, at that time, where they were whatever their job was, maintaining vehicles or whatever. They were doing that then and there. They had a day job, essentially. And so when they would go to Afghanistan, they would continue to do that day job. And so it was definitely in a much worse situation to be there than to be where we were back home. But for us, that was our time to do our job. And it was a very different job. And at the end of the day, you know, people say, well, you chose infantry. Yeah, we did. That's the point. We volunteered to be on the tip of the spear, meeting the enemy face on. And I don't think that, you know, obviously we want to make sure that we acknowledge that everybody else was on the team. But I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging also that there are additional hardships that come and there's additional merit, I would say, to what we did. And at the end of the day, we're where the rubber met the road, you know.
Well, hey, look, Rob, I completely agree. I mean, this is why and this is something that really kind of bothered us, rubbed us the wrong way, but since we're going down that path, we'll go there. This is why the combat infantryman's badge was so special to me. Yeah, it's so good. Been going through my old stuff and unpacking. I've been in this place for a year now, but I finally got all of my military stuff back after my divorce was finalized. Like why it took that long to get my military gear back, I don't know, but nevertheless, like I found the very first Ranger tab that was pinned on me. You see the pin there and everything. My dad pinned this on me. This is worked my ass off to get this. It was really, really shitty experience, really tough. I'm proud of it, but that CIB was something that I cherished, and it's because you only get that if you're in the infantry and now in the special forces and direct combat with an enemy of the United States. You know, and I took a lot of pride in that because that award was emblematic of our job and what set us apart from everybody else, just like the blue cord, right? And what I was explaining to somebody the other day was that what's cool about the infantry, actually, you know what? It was my son. It was Ethan, Rob, who's, 14. He's growing up fast. It was like, what's cool about being in the infantry is that when you walk, if you're in your dress uniform and you're wearing your cord and you've got your CIB, and you got, back in the day, you had branch insignia too with the cross rifles. Everyone knew you were infantry. Everyone knew that you were a war fighter. Everyone knew that you, in some level, you were front towards enemy. And if you had the CIB, it means you were getting shot at by that enemy. So there's almost like another layer of respect for the infantry. But when we were there, it was when they rolled out the cab. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
the combat action badge, which I'm fine with, again, now that there's a little perspective. Especially since a lot of these, especially in Iraq or anyone that was running convoys in Afghanistan, you didn't have to be the infantry to get your ass blown up by an IED or get shot up in an ambush. So again, I think it's totally fine. I mean, I look back on it now, again, with some leadership perspective, thinking, well, wait, it's probably a good thing that we recognize those troops for their combat service too, but at the time it just felt like they were trying to make everybody infantry. Do you remember that? They were watering down the CIB.
They changed the uniform so that for officers and enlisted had their branch insignia on the collar. They removed that.
That was a huge mistake. That was a huge mistake. Yeah. I remember that. Those cross rifles mean something.
They were. Yeah, and I think the way that they were thinking, this is somebody who hasn't been. I don't think these were decisions being made by people who had been in like direct combat, because I think they thought it was the same thing. But a movement to contact where the enemy's there waiting for you and you're going to find them and kill them is a very different thing than you're traveling somewhere where you're not supposed to be in a fight and then you get in a fight. They're not the same thing. And while you certainly want to acknowledge those who get in a fight, for whatever reason, it's not the same thing as getting your legs moving toward the enemy. That's a different thing. And they made that badge look a lot like the combat infantryman's badge, which was kind of a thumb in the eye, in my opinion. And I think that it's perfectly reasonable to have issues with the way that they handled that stuff. I think it's reflective of a lot of the attitudes. Where there was just a lack of respect for the combat guys, And I think that for us in Afghanistan, I think we benefited from being neglected in that sense, though, because in a lot of ways we were able to fight in the way that we were meant to fight, rather than having somebody look over our shoulders. And so we benefited from that kind of neglect. But I think that neglect was a lot of what resulted in a lot of those policy changes. Don't you?
Wow. I mean, oh my God, it's an absolutely fantastic point. God, that neglect was the silver lining on the deployment. Where we didn't have to. We weren't we had. Get company commander's approval, but our commander passed it down to me, make the decision on the ground. Oh my God. We fought an infantryman's dream out there. I say infantrymen, it's because back when we served, again, I got attacked for this in politics as well. When I said my men this, my men that. Why are you just saying men? It's like, well, that's because it was just men when I served. It was idiots, But that's also something that infantry commanders say, men, this is what we're doing. We're scaling point to hawk. See you on the other side. I mean, like every combat leader going back to Alexander the Great would say that. It's like, it's a great point.
You got to remember, you don't have to apologize for any of that stuff. I know you know this, but you don't have to apologize for that stuff, because the people who complain about those things, they don't want you to do the right thing. They want to catch you doing something that they can call the wrong thing. They're not looking for the right thing. You know what I mean? Yeah,
they're complete idiots. They're who I like to call mouth breathing morons, but who've never served anything but themselves for their entire lives. These it was a silver lining that we didn't have people breathing down our neck, that we were free to engage the enemy in the way that we wanted, in the way that we saw fit, and we operated extremely effectively. But do you also remember? Okay, so going back to the rolling out of the combat action badge, and again, here we are going off on a tangent here, but they also rolled out the black berets at the same time. Do you remember that? Do you remember how mad the Rangers were at that?
Yeah.
How the Rangers would wear their black berets, and then they gave everyone black. So here we were mad that as standard infantry, okay, now they're giving cabs to everybody. But at the same time, or roughly the same time, I mean, it didn't like overlap exactly, but roughly the same time period. U.S. Army Rangers, the Ranger battalions would wear black berets. The black berets set them apart from everybody else. Well, then Shinseki at the time, I think it was Shinseki, gave everybody black berets, and the Rangers were like, this is bullshit. But they gave the Rangers tan berets, and they're like, these tan berets are stupid. I mean, it was just like everything. Everybody was pissed. Everyone is so mad. But now you look at what they're doing to the military, and those problems that we had back then seem like nothing. They seem like nothing compared to what they're doing to our military today. So I guess, again, 20 years of perspective, I don't know, man.
Well, you were on Jocko Willing's show, and you talked with him about how one of the things that he mentioned was that he had his companies. They were named, instead of just being Alpha Company, Bravo Company, they were Attack Company, and I don't know the Bravo would be, but they were naming the companies to distinguish them, and I think that's something that you did very well, because for us to be called the Outlaw Platoon, I don't know how many people know that, but this wasn't something that was sanctioned by the Army. We just decided that this was an identity we were going to take on. I mean, most platoons had some kind of a nickname, but we created the emblem and distinguished ourselves from others, because I think that's the right move. That's the thing. That's what winning teams do. You follow every Super Bowl team in history, the NFL, they all have distinguished themselves in one way or another. They weren't just milquetoast, do what everybody else did. They found ways to be different, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's something to be celebrated.
That I haven't thought about that in years. I mean, we did. Remember? Do you remember? We had T-shirts made, and I mean, had Mike Emmerich, who's one of our soldiers, an amazing artist, like drew the emblem, and I had a guidon made. And remember, we ran with it once, and we got in trouble. I got in trouble because you're not supposed to. And I didn't know. We were like out there as a platoon running around with a guidon like a complete idiot. But you're not allowed to run around with platoon size elements and below. Don't get their own guidons. Only companies do. But there I was, like a moron, but people liked it, that identity was something that we did defend. We circled up around it, and I think that we embodied that in Afghanistan, and it came to be, we came to be known, and where we would listen to the enemy's radios, and they'd see the green skulls on the sides of our trucks and just choose not to engage us. Just, hey, maybe I'm going to pick an easier target. And you're right. I mean, that when we decided, because it wasn't just me, Rob, it was just everybody was like, we need a name. We need something to, we need something to rally around. We have to have something, to coalesce this crazy. And we were the bad news bears of the battalion. We were always messing up. I was always getting in trouble, always getting yelled at for not shaving enough, not getting a haircut. You remember when we went up to Orkney for that battalion patrol? I think you were my driver, and we had to go pick up Colonel Toner and bring him back. And we never wore the neck stuff on our IBA. But that patrol I did, because I'm like, what do you think the chances are of me being able to get out of here without shaving? 'Cause, we're in combat and stuff. Who cares? And it wasn't. I didn't have a damn beard. I had it wasn't like this. It was one day. We drove up there, stayed overnight, and I forgot my razor or something. And I'm like, what am I going to do?
You're the kind of guy, you got that dark, thick hair, you can't get away with it.
Yeah, and so I remember, I think were you there? Were you on that patrol?
I probably was.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know, what are the chances I'm going to do? And of course I give the patrol brief, and Colonel Toner's there, and we got no bullshit, 30 some trucks in this convoy, because the battalion commander and his TAC is coming, and his PSD, his personal security detachment, and they got trucks, and then I got my platoon, and I'm the convoy leader. And it was like a 3-hour drive or something. Do you remember how long of a drive it was from Oregon? It was like 3 hours. Was it 3? Or was it an hour?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I don't.
People don't realize. I think they might imagine that we're driving on roads out there. It's like just driving through a field for hours and hours, basically, and we're going about the pace of a school zone. So if you can imagine riding a school zone for hours, that's the mind-numbing experience with a helmet on that weighs so much it hurts your neck.
Yeah, it was crazy. Well, he pulls me. First of all, I'm super nervous as it is, because it's you don't want to look like an ass in front of the boss, you know? And I'm the one leading the patrol back, so as you said, there were no roads. It's not like make a left at the red light. It's like, no, make a left where that guy's popping a squat and let's see if we can go there. Like, it's literally like that. Like, no, you're going to go down that road. You're going to pass like a wooden stick sticking out of the mud. You're going to see a beehive hanging from the tree. Make a left at that beehive. Am I exact? That's exactly how it is, right?
Not even a little bit. No.
I mean, that's exactly how it is. So my point is, it's easy to get lost. And if you get lost, one, you can get shot up pretty badly if you find yourself in enemy territory. Or two, it could be like a 3-hour drive could become a 6-hour drive, and then all of a sudden you got the battalion commander like looking at his watch, thinking, "Oh my God, this infantry lieutenant's a moron." And then, what if you run out of gas? Or what if you run out of fuel? I mean, that was a concern as well. Like, so many things I was nervous about. So I go through the patrol brief, hit it out of the park. We don't wear the neck pieces, but on that patrol I did. So I got my helmet on and my sunglasses on, and I have my neck guard up here, and I'm trying to like hunch up underneath it like this so that he can't see. Like, and he comes over to me. He's like, "Sean." I'm like, "Yes, sir." He's like, I think he was like, "Lieutenant Parnell." I'm like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Take off your neck piece and your sunglasses. Let me see your face." And I was like, "Son of a bitch." And he's like, "You didn't shave. You didn't fucking shave." And I'm like, he's like, "You got 5 minutes to go shave this before." I'm like, son of a bitch, I didn't have a razor. So you know what I did? I like run, this is like disgusting, but I like run into the bathroom and I'm like scrambling around in full kit, right? And you have to have your rifle because you got to carry it everywhere, you know? Like, remember that? Like running around everywhere in full kit like a moron. And I see this razor, this disposable razor sitting on the top of the trash. Like, seriously, what the hell was I supposed to do? And so, like, I'm like, you're like pressing down on the water. It's like, there's like no hot water, you know, because you have to press down on the things. You can't like turn a faucet. It's like trickling out. And I'm just like, with a razor from the trash. And I get back and like my face is all cut up. And he's like, "Let's go." I'm like, what? Damn it. You know, like, why? Like, at the time, like, again, I get, so looking, again, talk about having a perspective. At the time, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, we're in combat. Who cares if we don't shave a little bit? But it really was a discipline thing. It really was. Looking back, it was the right call because as annoying as it was, because it was so dumb, you know? But it served a purpose, a tactical purpose. If you got hit with gas or some sort of, you know, nuclear, biological, chemical threat, you got a beard, your gas mask ain't sealing, and you're dying. You know, it's just that simple. So it did serve a tactical purpose, but I do think that discipline and adherence to that standard, even if it's a small one, right? Because you think like, oh, shaving, who cares? We're in combat. We can just let this go. No. Because when you start compromising on the small stuff becomes big stuff, and big stuff in combat gets you killed. And I think, Rob, first of all, totally wrong, and the shaving thing was necessary, but also I think that's why I don't know for sure, so I'm just speculating, but like other units would get out in the field, their gunners would take their helmets off or something. All of a sudden they get shot in the head and they're dead. Well, we had 6 guys shot in the head. They all survived because they never took their helmets off. We had guys getting shot up. Shrapnel injuries. You know, we had RPGs exploding, hitting turrets. They would have burn injuries, but they would have their gloves on. They'd have their glasses on. I can't tell you how many times gunners would show me shrapnel stuff from like holes in their glasses that they were wearing. Had they downgraded their uniform even for a second at the wrong time, they're blind. Or they lose a hand.
Yeah, I remember Wright his eyeball was saved. They had there was that vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. It cut right through. I think it cut part of his eye, but the glasses deflected the shrapnel just enough that it saved his eyeball. Took off half of his ear, but
right. Oh my God, what a stud he was. But I mean, like you look at units that came after us, and it's just like they would downgrade their uniform, and I just feel like you'd see, like, watch a documentary like Restrepo, for example. And guys would be like walking around in firefights in their underwear. And I'm like,
right.
What the hell is this? Like, that's not right. Someone, I mean, like, so.
That was one of the things I got onto my guys a lot about those kinds of things. And sometimes they didn't like me for it. But, one of the things you do in a patrol base is, you've got some guys are sleeping and some guys are on security. They're protecting the force. And when my guys would sleep, I always told them, all your gear is packed up, ready to go. Because if we got to get up quickly, you're going to be ready to roll, ready to fight, ready to move.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're going to end up without your gear for the rest of the deployment. A lot of those guys did, and that happened, And I wasn't going to let that happen under my watch. And you are absolutely right about the discipline, and that makes a big difference. That's often a life or death difference. And not only is it whether or not you're following the rules as they're laid out, but also the mindset of ticking off the boxes that are the details, thinking in terms of details. What details have I done? Have I gone through the routine that I need to prepare myself for this fight? Because even though shaving might seem like it's immaterial in a fight, it is a routine, and a routine keeps you alive. When unlike most jobs where you can make a mistake and have a bad day and then just try again tomorrow, for us to make a mistake might mean the end of your life or the end of the lives of the people around you. And so that discipline is important. But kind of taking back to what we were talking about earlier, I think sometimes you can go overboard with the disciplines. I think the disciplines themselves are important, but you cannot worship the disciplines. This is Jesus taking the grain on the side of the road during the Sabbath and telling the Pharisees that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You cannot elevate the rules above people. And Colonel Toner was a stickler for rules, certainly. And I don't know if you remember this. The first firefight we were in, you probably don't remember this. We were in that weird, like, mountainous, like, valley kind of thing. It was like a little bowl there. And so I was trying to raise battalion net. I was trying to, because I was still your radio operator at the time. I was trying to get to the battalion, to talk to battalion so that you could, relay to them what was going on. And so we would use a satellite deal for that. This is pretty old school. So we had this little spider-looking thing that I would set up, a little antenna, and I had to point it just a certain way. And you look at this manual, and it tells you this is the stars you pointed toward it. Yeah. And you're supposed to point it just this way at this time of day and that kind of thing. And so I was pretty good at setting the thing up. I had done it enough times. But I would just kind of estimate, I'd say, okay, I'm going to point it roughly in this direction. So I'm like under fire, bullets are whizzing past. And I'm putting it up on top of the Humvee because that's the elevated position where I can get it up, above the trees and whatnot. And I'm like, bullets coming past, and I'm aiming this thing, and I get it pretty good. And so I call on to battalion, and I got him, and it's just a little staticky, but I got him. And I explain what's going on, and I get the battalion commander on, Colonel Toner, and he says very calmly, 3-6 Romeo, this is Cat 6. Sounds like you've got some comm problems. You need to fix your net. Call me back when you've got it under control. Cat 6 out. I was like, no! That was my first combat failure,
Well, it's like, we do have comms problems. I'm getting my ass shot off down here.
What you don't realize is getting this right may cost my life. Is that really what you want? and that's my point, is that sometimes you can elevate the rules above common sense, and I think that might have been one of those moments.
Well, I think, God, that was crazy. How much of a pain in the ass were those TACSATs? Like, all
of those antennas and satellites, they were all very
Who designs
archaic.
those things? It's like, all you have to do is put together this mini satellite dish on the roof of your truck. Like, if it comes in this satchel that you have to you unzip it, and you put the base down, and you screw the middle part on, and you screw the top part on, and you have to angle it just right to hit the satellite. Mm-hmm. I'm like, who the hell's doing that in an ambush? Like, if you need you're trying to raise the tactical satellite phone, we would have FM comms and stuff that were secure, but a lot of that stuff in the mountainous areas, it's like line of sight. Sometimes you can rebound a signal off of another truck or relay something, but it's very unreliable, especially in a place like Afghanistan where you're in, you've got a small unit, in our case, a company minus, in charge of an entire district, a huge border region, very unreliable, right? So, but the tactical satellite phone is how you talk to everybody else. And, one TACSAT linking up to a satellite can talk to our battalion base or even Bagram that was 100 miles away. But here's the problem. I just told you how difficult it was to set up. And then when you're out in the field, trying to set that, it's like, do you remember how just unreliable? We'd be like on some observation post in the middle of nowhere, and it like almost never worked. Never worked.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like Tinker Toys in combat. The whole thing. It always felt very shaky too. It just felt like the lowest bidder made this. I don't know. To me, I was always skeptical that it would work. Obviously, it works, and that we get the job done, and we got the job done. But I don't think it's quite like people imagine when they watch the movies and everything. They got the little computer that shows where the bad guys are, and it was almost never like that.
It's never like that. In fact, something always goes wrong. In that first firefight, we couldn't get comms when and it was a deliberate ambush for precisely that reason. They shot us up as soon as we passed around Hilltop 2474 or Gangakel Hill, like right there. That was outside of Malikshay, right? That was Malikshay was one in the south. So
that's right. I think.
Couple clicks from the border. And come right around this huge hill, like the mountain, as steep as you could be. And it goes down to this like little gravy boat and then back up this hill. They ambush right at the base of the gravy boat, right at the bottom of that gravy boat, knowing that huge mountain would interrupt line of sight comms. It's crazy. So tell me about like, what firefight stands out in your mind as having changed you, or as where you learned the most, or was there a moment like that for you?
I think I don't know that I would say. I think it might be too much for me to say that there was a particular moment that changed me, but I will tell you that on June 10th, at the outset, it was very obvious that we were outnumbered. Just the volume of fire was so heavy, and so many guys were dropping. It was obvious that we were in a rough spot. And for me, and I'm not a defeatist, but it occurred to me that might be the end. And for me, it was like, it wasn't, I wouldn't exactly say that my life flashed before my eyes, but I thought about people I care about, and do they know that I care about them? And I have tried. I'm not good at it. I'm not a very expressive person, I think, but I tried very hard to make sure people know that I care about them. And sometimes I get a little bit gushy, and I feel like I can kind of trace that back to that, because, man, it's like, it's just, there's a quote from the famous Native American leader about living a life that is worthwhile, and that when your time comes that you're ready to go, because you've done a lot. I can't remember the quote, but that was kind of where I was like, I've not done everything I should have done up to this point. So that was that experience for me, and when we had some close calls, man. I can remember running from, because I hated that fight, because I was halfway between being your radio operator and being in a rifle squad, because I think I guess we were training up.
You were about to get promoted. We were promoting you.
Yeah. And so I was still responsible to be the radio operator, but I was also assigned to a rifle squad. So I was like torn the whole time. And so I'm on the line with the rifle squad, with Wheat's squad, and just shooting back. And then I realized I gotta go make sure that they got calm, because I felt like maybe I looked back and could see somebody get angry with a radio or something. So I get up and I'm running back. And as I run, I'm kind of going uphill, and I'm running toward a Humvee to kind of go from one piece of cover to another. And one of our gunners was up there, and he's shooting a 50 cal, and he kind of glances down as he sees me out of the corner of his eye running up this hill, and his eyes get really wide, and I could see the little pieces of dirt kicking up off the ground in front of me, and the leaves are falling from the trees, pine needles and stuff falling from the trees overhead. And I'm running like, when you're a little kid and you're about to get spanked and you're running with your butt like way out in front of you so your parents can't whack it. I was kind of doing that, like, my legs were going faster than the rest of my body. And, man, that was pretty wild. There was some pretty close calls there.
It really was. I mean, what an unbelievable lesson, though, you took from it. Make sure the people that you know always know how you feel about them. That's pretty amazing. I mean, what were you afraid? What were you afraid of not having accomplished at that point, Rob?
That, man, because I tell you, if I were to describe my whole life, it would basically be a series of people. Incredible people I've been blessed to know. This is something that has taken me most of my life up till now to figure out, is that my God-given blessing has been the people around me. And so my life is just a series of milestones that are represented by different people, just incredible friends and family, and to have those kinds of people in your life, and then to not, you know how you drift away from people and you don't see them for a while just because you forget to call and they forget to call and that kind of thing. And of course, back then communication was even more difficult. That was kind of before social media. And, I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't right to leave people hanging like that. And, that's still the defining aspect of my life, is just, I've got incredible people in my life.
That's an amazing life lesson, Rob. And I really, really hope that the people that are watching and listening to this take that to heart, because, you're over there and life is just so fragile. And we learned at a very young age how fast it could go. And, and this is why I always say to people who ask me questions about what it was like or what it was like coming home, you're 20 something and you end up going through a deployment that we went through. And I mean, you have the wisdom of somebody who is in their 70s or 80s in a completely different phase of life, who death could come at any day, at any moment. Their friends are passing away. This is that specter, is that that hand of death is just close. So that's how it is in combat. It's just always there. Yeah. It's right there. Yeah. And you learn that as a 20 something. It's like you thinking that, my son, who again is 14, and that's 10 years away. I would think he was way too young to have to experience something like that. But we were young and we experienced it. And one of the things that I was afraid of, and like it was a completely irrational fear, completely irrational. But Rob, it scared the shit out of me. It was like, if I die here, I have no legacy, nothing. Yeah. No, I'll have like my family who loves me, they'll be sad. My friends who care about me, they'll be sad. But for how long? Yeah. I mean, maybe your parents will. It's always there. It's always there. They will always. They'll think of you every day. But do you ever think about that? Like, eventually, people move on. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have any kids. I don't have a family. I have no legacy. If I'm gone, my life, my story, everything that I've ever wanted to do is gone. And that's another thing that I couldn't escape, that I'm thinking about all the time. And I don't lose sleep over this stuff. This isn't like, I struggle with this. It's not like that. It's just that when you kill someone, every time we killed somebody over there, I mean, we did kill a lot of enemy soldiers, Rob. I mean, I swear to God, we were an unbelievably lethal and effective infantry platoon. I mean, our company as a whole was great too, but we were there for so long, we got to know the terrain a hell of a lot better than the enemy did. It was crazy. We were killing them so fast that the replacements didn't know the terrain as well as we did. It was the strangest dynamic in the world. But when you end somebody's life, you end everything that they were, that they are, and that they'll ever be moving forward. And that was just a real trippy thing for me,
Yeah, there's a quote. I know I always quote movies and TV, but there's a quote in the movie Unforgiven with what's his name?
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. Yeah. There's a guy that's a young guy who kills his first man, and he says, "I killed that guy." He said, "Yeah, hell of a thing killing a man. You take away everything he has, ever will have." And he said, yeah, well, he had it coming, didn't he? And he says, we all have it coming, kid. And that's kind of how I feel. There were some bad people we fought, and they needed to be removed from this earth, man.
I agree.
But there were probably some people that were just soldiers, and they had kids who were waiting on them, and and we killed them. And I don't think it's something to be ashamed of. I think a soldier does his duty, but I also think that it's something to consider when people recognize soldiers. I think that America is learning a lot of lessons right now about how to acknowledge our veterans and how to acknowledge our military in the right way. In Vietnam, obviously, it was the wrong way. People came home, they were being spit on and disrespected for doing what they felt like was a duty to the people they loved and cared about. They wanted to meet the wolf at the door. And I think those people have since those people from the Vietnam generation, probably a lot of Vietnam veterans, have helped to swing the pendulum in the other way, to where soldiers are acknowledged very, very with a lot of respect. And there's good in that, and I think there is some bad in that. I think sometimes we have guys who are a little bit entitled as veterans, and that's something that
sure.
we have to guard against, because we are different. We're a minority, so to speak, and you have to guard against that feeling, that feeling sorry for yourself or feeling aggrieved in some way. And it's not a good way to live life, even if it's true. But then there's also situations where there are soldiers' statues being taken down for this reason or that reason, mostly political. And a soldier is not who they fight for. A soldier is a soldier, and that's it. When you volunteered to fight, you didn't say, I'll fight given these particular circumstances. You didn't sign a contract that said, I'll only go and fight in this kind of conflict. You said, wherever America as a republic sends me, that's where I'll go. Whether I agree with it politically or don't agree with it, it's a republic, and I will go when I am sent. And that's what American soldiers have always done, whether they fight for the U.S. or they fight for their state in the Civil War. And those are soldiers who are doing a duty, and they deserve respect.
It's a very interesting perspective, Rod, because I do think that there's a reason why they call soldiers GIs, and it's like government issue. It's you're not making the decision to go. You love your country, and they're sending you. You're the last 50 meters of, foreign policy. In some cases, failed foreign policy. That's fascinating. You really got me thinking here, and I think when you're talking about removing statues, you're talking about removing Confederate soldiers, Confederate generals, things like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, I don't celebrate. I don't like the idea of statues of any people in public places. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't think that any individual should be elevated too much. I believe in the Enlightenment guys like Frederick the Great, who didn't even wear any medals on his uniform, just a plain blue tunic, and George Washington, these types that didn't live for all the decoration and pomp and circumstance. But when you've got statues that represent the soldiers in general, and you're tearing that down, just the average Confederate soldier, and you're tearing that down, I got a problem with that, man, because I don't think it's because even as the cause for which they were fighting politically was very unpopular, and it should have been unpopular. The Confederacy deserved to lose that battle. But you know what? There were a lot of people who didn't believe in us fighting in Afghanistan. And it's just a matter of time, or Iraq, it's just a matter of time before statues of our guys are being torn down. And because that's for consistency, that's where that goes.
I agree, Rob. I do. It's hard to argue with that logic. And you talked about we have to guard against an entitlement thinking. I completely agree. What I have learned in my 41 short years on this earth is that really the road to unhappiness in life is paved with on entitlement thinking. And there are a lot of veterans who come home and hey, I'm different than you, screw you, I'm better than you, I fought, you didn't. There just are. And that is something that our community needs to stop doing, because the reality is we're servants of America. And being a servant requires at its core, now I'm not saying that veterans deserve no recognition, because We do. We're different, and we do get recognition. We have the VA hospital. I mean, it has lots of problems. I mean, I get it, and we're always looking to improve it, but it's a multi-billion-dollar healthcare system in every state in the country that's intended to take care of veterans when they come home. Most countries don't have that. Right. As flawed as the VA is, as some of the policies, of course, need to change to make it better, but it's there. And almost everywhere we go, people are thanking us for our service. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And now, again, many of these changes were brought on by Vietnam veterans who did not have that courtesy extended to them when they came home. And
they could have been bitter. They could have been bitter and just dismissed us, dismissed, the whole thing. But they chose to do what was not done for them and celebrate American soldiers.
You know what I don't like, Rob, as well? I can't. What bothers me is the culture pushing the narrative that war somehow breaks us, and we come back and we need before I ran for office, I was a public figure and I'd be asked to speak at these political events, and these politicians would come up to me and be like, oh, thank you so much for your service, like I'm some sort of victim. I'd be like, dude, get the hell away from me, man. I asked to do this. I volunteered to go. I would do it again in a second if this country was ever threatened. I'm not broken by my experience. Not at all. On the contrary. That experience made me a better person. It made me a better father. It made me a better leader. Now, of course, what comes with any experience in life are positive and negative, right? Of course, combat changes you in lots of very, very deep-seated existential ways. No doubt about it. But you look back at yourself when you were a freshman and then you graduate as a senior in high school. Right? Say you're graduating, walking across the stage, getting your diploma, and you look at a picture of yourself when you're a freshman. Most of the time, you're thinking like, holy shit, what was I thinking? What was I doing? I was told I was an idiot back then, because experiences change us. And combat's an experience, right? There's lots of very negative stuff there and emotionally charged stuff and loss of life, like very life and death stuff. But there are positive things with it as well. I volunteer for it. I do it again. I'm proud of my service there. So stop treating me like I'm broken, I am not a victim. I volunteered. And you see this narrative pushed in our culture everywhere. In our movies, broken combat veteran comes home. He's broken by PTSD. He's volatile. He's 3 seconds away from climbing a freaking clock tower with a sniper rifle or something. Give me a break. It's ridiculous. And you see our statues where like a military veteran like holding a flag, and you're just like, come on, man, take a knee, drink water, face out. You still have a mission, and that mission is, continuing to serve America, continuing to serve your fellow community. Because while I think that the pathway to unhappiness as life is paved with entitlement thinking, the pathway to living a life filled with meaning is service to others, to your family, to whatever your religion, your faith, whatever. And just upsets me when society and culturally and in our movies and in the media, we're just combat veterans are immediately assumed to be a little bit broken. And it just bothers me.
Yeah, well, and the effects are there. There are often negative psychological and physical effects, but it doesn't mean that's who you're going to be. Life is not trying to make your disadvantages your identity. It's overcoming them and finding new strength as a result of it. My grandfather talked about him last time, and he was in some of the toughest fighting the world has ever seen, and he chose to be somebody who was kind. I think maybe once ever did I hear him raise his voice. My brother and I were like going at it, fighting each other in the back of the vehicle or whatever. And that was the only, just stop your quarreling. That was like the most I ever heard him raise his voice. He was a kind person. He was a very, cool under pressure, supportive of his friends and family. Just the kind of person anybody would admire. And, it's not like the war was behind him. On his deathbed, he was dying of cancer, and, you get a little bit loopy, I think, under those circumstances. And, he was in his bedroom, plugged into, IVs and things like that. And he woke up in the night, was disoriented. He pulled him out. And so now he's bleeding from his IV, ports. And, my parents heard him yelling, I've been shot. In his mind, he had gone back to Germany and was wounded again. He had been wounded twice in World War II, and he was in his mind, he was back on the battlefield wounded. And so it's not like that wasn't still there. It's not like he didn't have disadvantages that came from the experiences he had, but he chose to be somebody that showed the opposite side of that coin, and to be somebody who was kind and gentle and set an example for everybody.
Wow. That is that's something. What an incredible guy. He was an incredible guy that you are. Obviously, your parents are lucky to have you. And I mean, so speaking of transitioning out of the military, tell us a little bit about where people can find you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now to help people get out.
Well, so I've co-founded an organization called Claymore Operations, and basically what happened, I got out of the military and I had a plan for myself career-wise, and it was a bad plan. But where I was, sometimes you're in the middle of the desert and you say, oops, I took a wrong turn very, very far back behind me. And I was just fortunate. Like I said, my blessing on this earth has been to be surrounded by just incredible people. I think, I used to always think, what is my talent? I had friends who could play the drums and could do this well and do that well, and I never felt like I had a talent. And then I realized, I'm surrounded by talented people. That's my talent. I surround myself with talented people, and that means that I have an advantage in the sense that they can share their wisdom with me, and they can provide mutual support in that way. And that was what I had. When I was finishing school, I was kind of, a little bit lost in terms of direction. And I had some friends who came in and mentored me. And so what we found was that it made a huge difference. And I had one of my buddies, one of the guys from Outlaw Platoon, called me, and he had been in for something like 10 years at that point. And he said, man, I didn't go to school while I was in the Army. And so now I'm going to have to work at a salt mine or something. I'm going to start from scratch. And it made me sick, because he was like one of the best people I knew. And I knew that he had gained so much experience and there was so much of value that he had gained in his time in the military. And with the experience he had, he could take a job in middle management at any company in America, and they would be fortunate to have him. He just couldn't see it. And I felt like if he had a mentor like I did, looking over his shoulder, that he would be in so much better situation. So what we created is Claymore Operations, and what we do is we provide mentorship. We actually do mentorship for active military people, active duty military. And so while they're still in the military, as early as possible, we connect military people with mentors, and actually 2 mentors. So each, what we call warfighter, which is our mentee, each warfighter has 2 mentors. One is a military veteran, and one is a civilian, and that gives 2 different perspectives. It's like crossing a bridge. You want somebody on each side of that bridge. And, we have found that it just makes such a difference. And when you have that whole military career as a runway to be able to start to build a new purpose after your military time, because you can only be in the military for so long, whether it's an injury or whatever it is. Everybody gets out of the military eventually, and they're going to need a new purpose. You know your purpose. When you're on the battlefield, you know your purpose. We want them to know their purpose when they come off of the battlefield. And just like you said, that service should not end at the end of when they take that uniform off. That's not when your service ends. You just need a new purpose. And that purpose can't be a goal for yourself. So you say, well, I want to have a Lamborghini. Okay, that's a perfectly reasonable goal. You can get a Lamborghini, work hard, get a Lamborghini. But that's not purpose. Purpose is, I am achieving goals for myself and for my family, and I am helping others achieve their goals. I am making myself indispensable in the community, and that's what we build our mentees, our warfighters, to become. We connect them with those mentors, and over time, through weekly or monthly calls, because military people are all over the world. Through those calls, they're able to build a network so that they have connection, and start to make a plan for themselves, so they know what to do when they get out, so that they have that purpose, so that they can see their next mission. And we feel like it just makes a huge difference. That is so smart, to begin the process while they're still in, because when you're in, and whether you're leading troops as an officer, or you're enlisted, or non-commissioned officer, it's such a job. It's like a 24/7 thing. You're always on call no matter what, even when you're off. Yeah. But to be able to have somebody to talk to on
a semi-regular basis. It's like, hey, maybe you should have an eye towards this too. Or what do you like? Maybe you should take this test, and like when you get out, maybe I can connect you with this person in this industry that you can start building a relationship with now. That is so smart, because what happens is these guys get out, and men and women get out, and especially after a tough combat deployment, they're like, I'm out of here. I'm popping smoke as fast as possible. Turn all their stuff in at what the hell is that place called? You turn all your equipment in. You got to clear CIF. Remember the CIF at Fort Drum with like 15 shopping carts of cold weather gear? Yeah. Nonetheless, clear CIF, and they're gone in 2 days, and like then they're out. And then what? So,
well, a lot of these guys go into the military with a lot of baggage, man. They go into the military looking for something new, a new direction. They've got a lot of baggage. They get out of the military, they go right back to that baggage. They pick it back up and they take it with them. And, we wonder why they're killing themselves. And they just they've lost that purpose. They had the purpose while they were in the military. Now they've lost it. They're back to where they started, and we can't let that happen. We cannot let that happen. And the only solution is connection. It's people, relationships. And that's where what we do is relational. It's not transactional. It's not a certain number of phone calls to get you a job. It's not that at all. These mentees have different things they're looking for. We had one. She was an officer. She was a pharmacist in the military, and she had everything going for her. She just had so many different directions she wanted to go. She just needed a little bit of narrowing things down. We had one guy. He was getting out, and he was going to retire, and he was a very sociable, outgoing person, and he was going to go live on like a farm in the middle of nowhere. And we're like, he's like, we need to build you a network, buddy, because you're gonna drive your wife crazy. And and then we've got some guys that are just they're young and they don't know what's what, and they need a little bit more guidance. And we've just found a little bit of everything. But what we really aim for is to elevate them. We talked about some of the political stuff last time, and I just believe that we can solve so many of our problems in our society by putting people who know what it is to sacrifice. They know what it is to be responsible and perform a duty, and to put them in a more of an elevated position, to have them aim higher for a higher mission when they get out. That way they can take on responsibilities that other people are abdicating. And, we're the only organization in America doing this for active military who are still in. We're the only ones doing this. And it's just, we've got tremendous mentors. We've got C-suite, executives who are mentoring, and we've got just incredible people who are, retired generals, people who have so much to offer. And I would say that most of your listeners probably, they've, reached a certain age, they've achieved goals in their life. They probably have a lot to offer. And, if you feel like you support our military, you feel like you want to do something, you want to show how you are grateful for that service, volunteer your time, volunteer to be a mentor, because you have a lot to offer. And most people I have found are very happy to share their wisdom. They're happy to share the things that they know. And these young guys don't know to ask. And that's what we're doing. We're just matching the two together.
How can people help? Outside of volunteering, is there a way people want to contribute? It's a nonprofit, right?
It is a nonprofit. So there's no cost to our mentees or no cost to our mentors. Everything all of our costs are paid for by donors. So if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so on our website at claymoreops.org. And there's just a donate button. Like I said, everything we do is from donations. We've been blessed to have people who have been right behind our mission, making donations from the start. And we'd love to have you part of the mission.
This is, I think it's a great idea, Rob. And you're a special American, man. I've told you this many times before, but this country is lucky to have you, and Claymore Ops is lucky to have you as well. And every single one of these servicemen and women that you're enlisting into these programs to be, young mentees, and even the mentors that you bring on, it's just so smart. And ultimately, I think it's going to make their worlds a little bit better. But you're probably also saving lives too, Rob.
Yeah.
Saving families.
I hope so, but like I said, to me, it's just a matter of elevating the people who need to be elevated. There are a lot of people who have a mouthpiece in this country that shouldn't. We don't need to hear from them,
I completely agree.
And there are a lot of people who have something to say and have something to contribute, and we're not hearing from them.
Well, Rob, thanks, brother. Thank you for coming on the podcast with me and I mean, we talked for well over 2 hours now. 2 hours total. We probably could talk for another 2 hours, and we'll bring you back again if you don't mind, and we'll talk more. But thanks for coming on, brother.
Can I say, Sean, that I really appreciate what you're doing, because you're talking about service after the military, and you've been doing that. Not only are you serving in your own way and various positions publicly, and certainly doing this, but you have led our platoon, you have led our men. And nobody required you to do that. You were required to lead us while we were in your platoon, and you chose to do that afterward, and that's something special. That's an example for the rest of us to follow.
Well, thanks, brother.
And I should also mention, you were an inspiration for Claymore Operations, because I saw that you knew. I think you understood better than I did that there was a new mission after the military. To me, it was just, I don't know, I'll go to school and figure it out. And you just kind of dove right in. You didn't wait for somebody to give you permission to tell the platoon story or to do any of the things that you've done. You just made it happen, and that's what we try to get our warfighters to do. So thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for being a patriotic American. Thank you for this podcast and doing all that you do, Sean.
Wow, Rob, that's humbling. Really, I mean, it's an honor. And you know how I feel when you're privileged to lead somebody, whether it's in the military or otherwise. That charge of leadership is something that is vested within you for the rest of your life. You can't just relinquish it. Even if you physically relinquish it, it's there. And I think it's an obligation. It's something you always have to fill those shoes. So that's just that's an honor, Rob. Thank you, and thanks for coming on the show. You're the freaking man, and we'll have you back soon, brother.
That sounds great, John. Thanks.
All right, later. All right, everybody. That is Rob Pinholt, CEO of Claymore Operations, member of Outlaw Platoon, begrudging radio telephone operator. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. He's an incredible American. If you like, as always, you say this every single week, but if you like this stuff, whether it's in video format or audio format or however you engage with this podcast, please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or I've got a Rumble channel now that we're building out all of our video content on there, and we're rolling out things, really cool, exciting things every week. Just hosted a week's worth of conservative talk radio, 3 hours a day, and got the news just this morning that it was the sixth biggest show in America on Rumble, which is amazing. So we're getting lots of cool stuff coming out on that front as well. So please subscribe to the podcast. Leave reviews for it if you can, because that helps us as well. Share these clips on social media if they resonate with you. That helps too. My website is officialseanparnell.com. We've got Battleground apparel on there now. We've got 2 different t-shirt versions that are out now. We're rolling out another one soon, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Never quit, never surrender. God bless you all, and God bless this amazing country that we live in. Take care.